At my daughter's funeral, my son-in-law told me I had 2 weeks to get out of his house. I'm Harold Bennett. What happened next? Well, let's just say assumptions are expensive lessons. Picture this. You just buried your only child. You're standing at her graveside, still holding the rose you couldn't bring yourself to drop on her casket, and your son-in-law leans in and whispers, "We need to talk about your living situation, Harry. This free ride is over." He said it right there, 6 feet above my daughter's body. But here's what my son-in-law didn't know. The house he was kicking me out of? I bought it in 1991. The company he worked for? The one he bragged about at every family dinner? I owned 34% of it through a trust my late wife created. For 6 years, he lived under my roof while treating me like a charity case. Instead of correcting him, I waited. Sometimes patience is the sharpest weapon you have. If you're new here, subscribe. I tell stories about people who mistake kindness for weakness. And trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. Because what my son-in-law discovered 3 weeks later taught him that the quiet ones aren't always the powerless ones. Let me take you back to the beginning. My daughter Rachel died on a Thursday in October, pancreatic cancer. She was 41 years old, and she fought like hell for 11 months before her body gave out. I was there when she took her last breath. Her husband, Craig, wasn't. He was at a conference in Las Vegas, something about quarterly projections and team synergy. He made it back 4 hours after she passed. Didn't even cry. Just started making phone calls about the arrangements. The funeral was 3 days later at Morrison's Chapel in Scottsdale. Rachel loved the desert, loved the way the sun painted everything gold in the morning. I wanted to bury her somewhere she could see the mountains. Craig wanted efficiency. Morrison's had availability, he said, close to the freeway for out-of-town guests, like we were planning a corporate retreat instead of saying goodbye to my little girl. I wore my old brown suit, the same one I wore to my wife Patricia's funeral 4 years earlier. It still fit, which surprised me. Grief has a way of shrinking everything except clothes. Craig wore something designer, charcoal gray, with a subtle pattern. He looked like he was attending a business meeting. Maybe to him, he was. The service was fine. Generic. The pastor had clearly never met Rachel. He talked about her love of family, her generous spirit, her devotion to her husband. All true enough, but shallow. He didn't mention how she used to call me every Sunday morning just to check in. He didn't mention our tradition of watching old westerns together, the ones her mother and I used to love. He didn't mention that she was the one who convinced me to keep living after Patricia died. But I held it together. 67 years of life teaches you how to grieve without breaking. The reception was at the house. My house, technically, though I hadn't called it that in years. When Rachel and Craig moved in 6 years ago, I'd told them to make it their own. Patricia was gone. The place felt too big for one person, and Rachel wanted to be close to me as I got older. It seemed like a perfect arrangement. What I didn't anticipate was Craig. He took over gradually, the way rising water takes over a basement. First it was the garage. He needed space for his workout equipment. Then the den. He needed a home office. Then the guest room where I'd been staying became temporary while they figured out long-term solutions. I ended up in the converted space above the garage, Patricia's old craft room. It was comfortable enough. Had a bathroom, a small kitchenette, plenty of natural light. But the symbolism wasn't lost on me. I'd gone from homeowner to tenant in my own property. Rachel apologized constantly. "It's just until Craig gets his promotion, Dad. Then we'll figure something out. Maybe build an addition." She never told Craig the truth about the house. She was going to. She'd promised me she would, but the diagnosis came, and then the treatments, and then the complications. There was never a right time. 3 weeks before she died, she gave me a letter. "Open this after I'm gone, Dad. It explains everything. I'm sorry I never found the courage." I still have that letter. I've read it probably 50 times. At the reception, Craig worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, accepting condolences, playing the grieving widower with practiced precision. He'd always been good at performing. It's what made him successful in sales, I suppose. The ability to become whatever the situation required. I sat in the corner of the living room, in the leather chair that used to be my father's, watched people come and go, watched Craig accept casseroles and sympathy and business cards from colleagues who saw a networking opportunity even at a funeral. Around 7 o'clock, after most of the guests had left, Craig found me. "Harry, we need to discuss some things." I looked up at him. He was holding a glass of wine, red, probably from the case I'd bought for Rachel's birthday last year. "What things?" He sat down across from me, leaning forward like we were negotiating a contract. "Your situation, the living arrangement. Obviously, things are going to change now that Rachel's gone." "Change how?" "Well," he took a sip of wine. "I've been carrying the weight of this household for years. The mortgage, the utilities, the property taxes. Rachel always insisted on letting you stay, and I respected her wishes, but she's not here anymore." He let that sentence hang in the air. She's not here anymore. Like it was just an inconvenient fact rather than the worst thing that had ever happened to me. "What are you saying, Craig?" "I'm saying you need to find somewhere else to live. I'm giving you 2 weeks. That's generous, considering the circumstances." I stared at him. 18 years. He'd been married to my daughter for 18 years, and this is who he was. Maybe this is who he'd always been. Maybe Rachel had been the filter that made him tolerable. 2 weeks, I repeated. "I'll help you look for places. There are some decent senior communities in the area. Affordable, if you qualify for assistance programs." Assistance programs, Medicare, food stamps, whatever. I'm sure there are resources for people in your situation. People in your situation. That phrase again. Like being a 6-7-year-old widower who just buried his daughter was a lifestyle choice. "I've already packed up the garage apartment," Craig continued. "Your things are in boxes by the door. You can take whatever you need tonight. Come back for the rest later." "You packed my things?" "I had some time this morning. Wanted to get a head start on the process." I looked at him. Really looked. Saw the calculation behind his eyes. The way he'd probably been planning this conversation for months, maybe years. Waiting for the moment Rachel couldn't protect me anymore. "Okay," I said quietly. Craig blinked. "Okay? I understand." He seemed almost disappointed by my response. He'd expected a fight, probably. Prepared arguments about legal rights and moral obligations. My acceptance threw off his script. "Good. That's good. I'm glad we can handle this like adults." I stood up slowly. "My knees aren't what they used to be. I'll be out by the weekend. Take the full 2 weeks if you need them." "I'm not a monster, Harry." "No," I thought. "You're worse. Monsters don't know they're monsters. You know exactly what you are." I walked to the garage apartment and looked at my boxes. Everything I owned, reduced to cardboard containers, stacked by the door like garbage, waiting for pickup. 67 years of living, and this is what it amounted to. But here's the thing. Craig had made a critical error. Several, actually. He'd assumed that because I drove a 15-year-old pickup truck, I was poor. He'd assumed that because I dressed simply and lived modestly, I had nothing. He'd assumed that because I never corrected Rachel when she told people he was the breadwinner, it was true. Assumptions are dangerous things. I sat down on the bed that was technically still mine for another 2 weeks, and pulled out Rachel's letter. I'd read it so many times I had it memorized, but I needed to see her handwriting, needed to feel close to her one more time. "Dear Dad," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm so sorry for leaving you with this mess. I should have told Craig the truth years ago. About the house, about the trust, about everything. But I was afraid he'd feel emasculated, afraid it would change how he saw me, saw us. I thought I was protecting our marriage. Maybe I was just being a coward. Here's what you need to know." The letter went on for 3 pages. Every detail, every document, every account. Rachel had been thorough, just like her mother. I put the letter back in its envelope and looked out the window at the house I'd built with my own hands. The house Craig thought he now owned. The house he'd given me 2 weeks to leave. 2 weeks. That was fine. I didn't need 2 weeks, but he didn't need to know that yet. The next morning, I did something Craig didn't expect. I called a lawyer, not just any lawyer, Patricia's lawyer, the one who'd helped us set up everything 30 years ago. Marcus Chen was retired now, living in Sedona, but he still remembered me. "Harry, I was sorry to hear about Rachel. She was a sweet girl. Thank you, Marcus. I need your help with something. Anything. I told him about Craig, about the 2-week ultimatum, about the assumptions. Marcus listened without interrupting, which is what good lawyers do. So he thinks he owns the house, Marcus said when I finished. He thinks he owns everything. And Rachel never told him about the trust? She was going to. Ran out of time. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You know, Harry, you could clear this up with a single conversation. Show him the documents. End the confusion. I could, but you're not going to. Not yet. Why not? I thought about the question. It was a fair one. The simple answer was pride. The complicated answer was something else entirely. Because he didn't ask, Marcus. He didn't sit down and have a conversation. He didn't say, Harry, I'm confused about the finances. Can you help me understand? He waited until my daughter was in the ground and then told me to get out. He made assumptions because making assumptions was easier than showing respect. So you want him to learn a lesson. I want him to understand that how you treat people matters. That quiet doesn't mean stupid. That old doesn't mean useless. That assumptions can cost you everything. Marcus chuckled. Patricia would be proud. Patricia would tell me to stop being dramatic and just show him the deed. She would. And then she'd make popcorn and watch the fallout anyway. I smiled for the first time in days. He was right. Patricia had a way of pretending to take the high road while secretly enjoying a good comeuppance. What do you need from me, Harry? Just make sure all the paperwork is in order. The deed, the trust documents, the corporate shares. When the time comes, I want everything airtight. It's already airtight. Patricia made sure of that before she died. That woman didn't miss a detail. I know. She was remarkable. Call me when you're ready to make your move. And Harry? Yeah? Don't wait too long. There's a difference between teaching a lesson and torturing someone. I promised him I wouldn't. Over the next week, I played the role Craig expected, the defeated old man, the burden finally being lifted. I started packing boxes, slowly, making a show of going through old photographs, pausing to wipe my eyes. Craig walked past a few times, never offering to help, just nodding with satisfaction that his plan was working. Found any places yet? He asked one evening. Looking at a few. What's your budget? Social Security is about $1,800 a month. Craig winced. That's not much. You might have to look at shared housing situations, or maybe assisted living. Maybe. I could help you with the deposit. Consider it a parting gift. A parting gift. For the man who'd helped raise his wife, who'd walked her down the aisle, who'd held her hand in the hospital when Craig was too busy with work to visit. That's generous, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Family helps family. I almost laughed at that. Almost. The second week brought visitors. Craig's friends. 3 of them. All in their 40s. All dressed like they were shooting a catalog for midlife crisis fashion. They came on Saturday morning without warning. Harry, this is Mike, Jason, and Derek. They're going to help me do an assessment of the property. Assessment? I'm thinking about refinancing. Maybe doing some renovations. The house has good bones, but it's dated. That kitchen hasn't been updated since the 90s. I'd installed that kitchen myself. Spent 3 weeks getting the cabinets level. Feel free to look around, I said. They did, for 2 hours. I sat in the living room and listened to them discuss potential and equity in ROI. They talked about tearing down walls and adding a pool and converting the garage into a guest house. The old man's apartment up there could be an Airbnb, Derek suggested. Good passive income. Once he's out, definitely, Craig agreed. They talked about me like I wasn't there, like I was already gone. Around noon, I excused myself and went for a drive. Needed to clear my head. Needed to remind myself why I was waiting instead of acting. I drove to Patricia's grave first. She was buried in a small cemetery outside of town, near the mountains she loved. I sat on the bench I'd donated and told her everything. You should see him, Pat. The way he walks around like he owns the place. Our place. The home we built. The wind rustled through the desert willows. Patricia's way of responding, maybe. Rachel's letter explained everything. Why she never told him. She was trying to protect her marriage. Thought if Craig knew about the trust, about the money, he'd feel threatened. She wanted him to feel like the provider. I pulled a few weeds from around the headstone. But here's the thing. She was wrong about him. Craig didn't want to be a provider. He wanted to feel like a provider. There's a difference. He wanted the credit without doing the work, the title without the responsibility. More wind. A hawk circled overhead. I'm going to tell him. Soon. But I need him to understand what he almost did first. Need him to sit with it. Is that wrong? Patricia didn't answer. She never did anymore. But I like to think she approved. I drove back to the house around 4. Craig's friends were gone. He was in the backyard, on his phone, probably planning more renovations for a property he didn't own. Hey, Harry. Get everything sorted? Working on it. Good. Oh, I almost forgot. I found some boxes in the garage. Old paperwork, files, that sort of thing. Figured it was yours. I put them by the trash for you to go through. My heart nearly stopped. What kind of paperwork? Tax returns, bank statements, boring stuff. Figured you'd want to shred it. I walked to the garage as calmly as I could. There, next to the recycling bin, were 3 boxes. Patricia's filing system. Our entire financial history. Documents worth millions of dollars, treated like garbage. Craig hadn't opened them. Probably assumed they were as worthless as he thought I was. I carried them up to the garage apartment and locked the door. Then I sat down and went through everything, piece by piece. The deed to the house, dated April 1991, in my name only. The trust documents Patricia had created in 1995, naming Rachel as the primary beneficiary and me as the trustee. The stock certificates from Maxwell Industrial, the company where Craig worked, showing that the Bennett family trust owned 34% of all shares. Maxwell Industrial, the company that employed my son-in-law as a regional sales manager. The company he bragged about at dinner parties. The company that had just appointed a new board, which included 3 trustees who answered to me. Craig had no idea. There was more. Life insurance policies, investment accounts, property in New Mexico that Patricia had inherited from her father. All of it held in trust. All of it technically mine to control. The total value, according to the most recent statements, just over $4 million. Craig thought he was evicting a penniless old man. He was actually evicting one of the largest individual shareholders in his employer. I called Marcus that night. I found the documents. All of them? Every single one. Craig was going to throw them away. Marcus exhaled slowly. He really doesn't know anything, does he? Not a thing. What's your plan? Tomorrow's my last day. The 2 weeks are up. And I think it's time for a conversation. I spent that night organizing everything. Made copies of every important document. Created a timeline showing ownership, contributions, and control. Patricia would have been proud of the organization. Around midnight, I found something I'd forgotten about. A letter from Rachel to Craig, never sent. It was in an envelope marked, "For Craig, after I'm gone." She must have written it during her treatment and then changed her mind. I read it. Dear Craig, I should have told you this years ago. The house we live in belongs to my father. He bought it in 1991 and let us move in when Mom died. He never asked for rent, never asked for anything. The money you think is yours? Most of it comes from a trust my parents created. I know you'll be angry. I know you'll feel deceived. But please understand, I was trying to protect your pride. I loved you, and I didn't want money to come between us. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and Dad is probably still there, wondering what happens next. Please, Craig, take care of him. He's the best man I've ever known, and he doesn't deserve to be alone. Love, Rachel. She'd never given it to him. Maybe she knew how he'd react. Maybe she hoped things would somehow resolve themselves. Or maybe, in the end, she realized that Craig wasn't the man she thought he'd married. I put the letter with the other documents. Craig would see it eventually. Whether it changed anything was up to him. Morning came too quickly. I'd barely slept, but it didn't matter. Some days run on adrenaline, not rest. Craig knocked on the garage apartment door at 9. Today's the day, Harry. You got everything sorted? Come in, Craig. We need to talk. He stepped inside, looking around at the bare walls and stacked boxes. Place looks good. Clean. I appreciate you being so cooperative about this. Sit down. Something in my voice made him pause. He sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly less confident. What's going on? I pulled out the deed first. Do you know what this is? He glanced at it. Looks like legal paperwork. It's the deed to this house, dated April 17th, 1991. Read the owner's name. Craig took the paper. I watched his face as he read, watched the confusion slowly transform into something else. This says Harold Bennett. That's me. But that doesn't make sense. Rachel said the house was ours. Rachel let you believe what you wanted to believe. This house has always been mine. I bought it 2 years before she was born. Craig stood up, sat back down, stood up again. That's impossible. We've been paying the mortgage for 6 years. There is no mortgage. I paid cash. What you've been paying, Craig, is rent to your wife, who deposited it into a household account she used for groceries and repairs. Rent? $1,200 a month for 6 years. That's $86,400 total. Thank you for that, by the way. It covered the property taxes. His face was turning red. Rachel told me. Rachel told you what you needed to hear, to feel like the man of the house. She was protecting your ego. Maybe that was a mistake, but she loved you. I pulled out the next document. The trust summary. This is the Bennett Family Trust, created in 1995 by my wife, Patricia. It holds our investments, our properties, and our stake in several companies. Craig wasn't reading anymore. He was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Current value, as of last month's statement, just over $4 million. $4 million. Yes. He grabbed the paper. Read it? Read it again. This can't be right. Rachel never had money. We lived paycheck to paycheck. No, Craig. You lived paycheck to paycheck. Rachel had access to the trust whenever she needed it. She just chose not to use it. Why? Because she wanted to be your partner, not your banker. She wanted you to feel successful on your own terms. I pulled out the stock certificates next. Do you recognize this company? He looked at the logo. His face went pale. Maxwell Industrial. Your employer. The Bennett Family Trust owns 34% of Maxwell Industrial. Has since Patricia's father bought in as an early investor in 1978. Craig sat down heavily. You own my company? The trust does. I'm the trustee. So yes, effectively, I own a third of the company that pays your salary. He was quiet for a long time. I let him process. Some lessons take a while to land. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you ask? I didn't think. Exactly. You didn't think. You assumed. You saw an old man in simple clothes driving an old truck and decided he must be worthless. You saw your wife helping me with groceries and assumed I was dependent. You saw kindness and mistook it for weakness. Harry, I didn't know. Of course you didn't know, because you never asked. Not once in 18 years did you sit down with me and have a real conversation about money or family or responsibility. You just made assumptions and treated me accordingly. He was shaking now. Whether from anger or fear, I couldn't tell. What happens now? I pulled out the last document. Rachel's undelivered letter. Read this. He read. I watched tears form in his eyes for the first time since Rachel died. Maybe the first real tears he'd ever cried for her. She wanted me to take care of you, he whispered. She did. And I tried to throw you out. You did. Harry, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. Stop. He looked at me. Sorry doesn't fix anything, Craig. Sorry is just a word people use when they get caught. What matters is what you do next. What do you want me to do? I sat down across from him. The same position he'd been in 2 weeks ago when he gave me the ultimatum. The same chair. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to move out of my house. You have 30 days. 30 days? I'm more generous than you were. He nodded slowly. After that, you're going to take some time. Think about who you are and who you want to be. Decide if you're the kind of man Rachel thought you were, or the kind of man you showed me at her funeral. And the company, Maxwell, I'm not going to fire you, Craig. That would be revenge, and revenge is exhausting. but I'm also not going to protect you. You'll succeed or fail on your own merits, just like everyone else. He stared at the floor for a long moment. I really thought I was better than you. I know. I thought being successful meant having more than other people, being in charge, calling the shots. A lot of people think that. What do you think it means? I looked out the window at the house I'd built, the home where I'd raised my daughter, the place where I'd buried 2 wives in my heart, even though their bodies lay elsewhere. I think success is measured by how you treat people who can't do anything for you. The old, the sick, the grieving, anyone you don't need to impress. Craig was quiet. You failed that test, Craig. Badly. But you're not dead yet. You can still learn. He stood up, gathered the papers, and set them back on the table. 30 days. 30 days. He walked to the door, then stopped. Harry? Yeah? Rachel was right about you. You are the best man she ever knew. He left. I sat in the apartment for another hour, just breathing, letting the tension drain away. It was over. Not happily, not cleanly, but over. 3 months later, I got a letter from Craig. He'd moved to Oregon, started working at a non-profit that helped homeless veterans find jobs, took a 60% pay cut, said it was the best decision he'd ever made. I think about what Rachel wanted for me, he wrote, not the money or the status. She wanted me to be good. I'm trying, Harry. I don't know if I'll ever get there, but I'm trying. I wrote back, told him Patricia would have said that trying was enough, that Rachel would have been proud, that I was proud, too, even after everything. We're not friends now. Maybe we never will be, but we're something. Family, perhaps. The complicated, broken, imperfect kind that most families actually are. The house is still mine. Probably always will be. I turned Rachel's old room into a library, put up photos of her and Patricia on every wall. Sometimes I sit in there and talk to them, the way I used to at the cemetery. The other day, a neighbor asked me why I stayed. Why I didn't sell the place and move somewhere smaller, easier to maintain. Because leaving would mean they won, I told him. Who? The people who think old means invisible. The ones who measure worth by bank accounts and job titles. The ones who mistake quiet for weak. He didn't really understand. That's okay, most people don't. But here's what I've learned in 67 years. The loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest. The richest person isn't always the wealthiest. And the one who seems to have nothing is sometimes the one holding all the cards. I'm Harold Bennett. I drive a 15-year-old truck. I wear simple clothes. I live alone in a house full of memories, and I wouldn't trade any of it for all the assumptions in the world. Thanks for listening to my story. If it meant something to you, hit that subscribe button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, quiet doesn't mean powerless. It just means patient.